Hi students, this is Professor Angley with another lecture in environmental science. In this lecture we'll be discussing how energy and matter move through ecosystems. One of the questions you should be able to answer by the end of the presentation is, why are large, fierce animals so rare in an ecosystem? While many biologists study life at the cellular and molecular level, ecologists study interactions at the species, population, biotic community, or ecosystem level. In Latin, species literally means kind. In biology, species refers to all organisms of the same kind that are genetically similar enough to breed in nature and produce live, fertile offspring. A population consists of all the members of a species living in a given area at the same time. All of the populations of organisms living and interacting in a particular area make up a biological community. What populations make up the biological community of which you're a part? The population sign marking your city limits announces only the number of humans who live there, disregarding the other populations of animals, plants, fungi, and microorganisms that are part of the biological community within the city's boundaries. An ecological system, or ecosystem, is composed of a biological community and its physical environment. The Chesapeake ecosystem, for example, is a complex community of different species that rely on water, sunlight, and nutrients from the surrounding environment. It is useful to think about the biological community and its environment together because energy and matter flow through both. Understanding how those flows work is a major theme in ecology. In this graphic, we see the relationship between ecosystem, community, population, and organism. Photosynthesis, and rarely chemosynthesis, is the base of all ecosystems. Organisms that photosynthesize, mainly green plants and algae, are therefore known as producers. In ecosystems, some consumers feed on a single species, but most consumers have multiple food sources. Similarly, some species are prey to a single kind of predator, but many species in an ecosystem are beset by several types of predators and parasites. In this way, individual food chains become interconnected to form a food web. Each time an organism feeds, it becomes a link in a food chain. In an ecosystem, food chains become interconnected when predators feed on more than one kind of prey, thus forming a food web. The arrows in this diagram indicate the directions in which matter and energy are transferred through feeding relationships. An organism's feeding status in an ecosystem can be expressed as its trophic level. In a savanna, grasses and trees are the primary producers. We call them autotrophs because they feed themselves using only sunlight, water, carbon dioxide, and minerals. Other organisms in the ecosystem are consumers of that chemical energy harnessed by the producers. An organism that eats primary producers is a primary consumer. Organisms that eat primary consumers are secondary consumers, which may, in turn, be eaten by a tertiary consumer, and so on. The highest trophic level is called the top predator. The complexity of a food chain depends on both the number of species available as well as the physical characteristics of a particular ecosystem. A harsh Arctic landscape generally has a much simpler food chain than a temperate or tropical one. Organisms can be identified by both the trophic level at which they feed and by the kinds of food they eat. Herbivores are plant eaters, carnivores are flesh eaters, and omnivores eat both plants and animal matter. Parasites, scavengers, and decomposers are an important part of an ecosystem. These recyclers feed at all trophic levels. At the top of the recycler system are scavengers who clean up dead carcasses. Below this are detritivores that consume litter and debris. After this come decomposers that break down organic materials into carbon dioxide and release carbon back into the atmosphere. As we think about trophic levels, it is often convenient to think of them arranged in a pyramid. The base of the pyramid is the primary producers or autotrophs. Because it forms the beginning of the energy food system, it is appropriate that it is at the base of the pyramid. But it also represents the largest number of individuals. As we proceed up the pyramid to primary consumers, to secondary consumers, to tertiary consumers, the population at each level also decreases. So, the ecological pyramid is a great way to describe the flow of matter and energy through an ecosystem. This graph shows the trophic levels and the ecological pyramid. Note that the producer is a flower. The primary consumer is a herbivore, a mouse in this case. The secondary consumer is a bird, and the tertiary consumer or top predator is a fox. Also note that parasites, scavengers, and decomposers are consumers that feed at all trophic levels. Energy moves through the trophic levels in an interesting and somewhat predictable way. In this figure, the values represent the amount of energy moving from one trophic level to the next. Producers fix energy from the sun in the form of carbohydrates, and this represents the starting point of the energy entering the system. Remember, only autotrophs can fix energy. When photoautotrophs obtain energy from the sun, they fix this energy. However, not all the energy received by the plant is necessarily available to the primary consumer. When herbivores feed on the producers, they transfer energy into the herbivore trophic level. But in this example, only 16.1% of the energy makes it to the herbivore level, 1.8% to the primary carnivore level, and 0.1% to the top carnivore in the system. So the question is, why does energy get lost as it moves from one trophic level to the next? Any ideas? Well, let's look at the next slide and see if we can figure it out. We can generalize the movement of energy among trophic levels using the 10% rule. As we saw in the previous slide, each trophic level has less total energy than the previous. If you go back and look at the previous slide, you will note that the difference in energy is approximately 10%. So we generalize this as the 10% rule. But where does this missing energy go? In each trophic level, represented here as a single animal, energy is lost because 90% of the energy that enters the trophic level is used by the members of that trophic level for their own daily activities, such as movement, digestion, and is lost in the environment as kinetic or heat energy. Thus, in any given trophic level, only about 10% is available to move into the next higher level. In this slide, the plant receives 1,000 joules of light energy, but only 10 joules is available for the deer. This is because the plant is using some of the received energy for its own purposes, growing roots, leaves, and flowers, and of course, the processes of photosynthesis and cellular respiration, and also because it's not 100% efficient converting light energy into chemical energy. So let's say we start at 10 joules. This is where the 10% rule comes into play. Once the deer gets the 10 joules of energy by eating the plant, it also uses up 9 joules doing deer activities like jumping, chewing, digesting, etc. So that when the lion eats the deer, it is only receiving 1 net joule of energy. Each movement of energy from one trophic level to the next results in a 90% loss and movement of only 10% to the next higher trophic level. So, when we started out this lecture, I asked you a question. The question was, why are large, fierce animals so rare in an ecosystem? Based on what you've learned in this video, can you figure it out?